Let's develop something for the web. I have loaded a simple program in my IDE which has two fields where you can input a first name and a last name and a button, and when you push the button you have a message box. You should be able to write such a program with what you know, and this is how it looks. So I can enter something here like Donald Duck, hit the button, and there you go. So you see we have a program in GUI which is executed in Swing. Now when we want to run it in the browser, there is this little spiderweb button here, which you may already have discovered. When you hit it, what happens is BBJ is basically loading an embedded web browser in your IDE. But I can also just harvest that URL here, open another Chrome instance, and paste it. So this is the old BBJ client, the BUI one. But what we want to do is actually run it in a new one in the dynamic web client. So I changed the URL to /webapp, and here I see the new client program in action. So what happens under the cover when I press the spiderweb button is that BBJ deploys the program to its internal embedded application server. So BBJ comes with a Jetty web server and creates the link and basically deploys it for both the older BUI and the newer dynamic web client, which is basically the web app URL. This is the one we want to work with in the future. I can show you this configuration when I go to Enterprise Manager. So I went to localhost 8888 BBJ EM, and then I log in with admin123. And when I go here on the web, app deployment, applications, I can see my sample application being enabled in all the clients. So, but when I double click on it, you see here, these are the two interesting checkboxes. So when I hit the spiderweb, both get checked, and it's creating here an entry. I could have gone ahead and simply create that entry directly in Enterprise Manager, but I used the spiderweb button for the comfort of not having to type this. So now let's see how we can make this program responsive. Let's get rid of this one. And so as you can see here, this program is still written to basically do a fixed positioning of the controls on the screen. So we have this one at position 1010 XY, 200 wide, and 20 high. And what we want to do now is we want to tell BBJ, no, please do not do pixel-oriented positioning and sizing, but leave it to the client, the browser, and let's apply in the second step some CSS rules for positioning, sizing, and so on. The way to do that would be on the level of the window. So when we look at the add window, it comes with an additional parameter you could give here, which is basically flags. So let's go to the documentation and examine the add window. So I go to documentation basis.com, products, and I search for the add window. There we go. You see here it's coming with an additional optional flags here, and the flag we're going to need is this one. It has a slightly odd name. The name does not really tell us use CSS. This has some legacy reasons. The guys are just busy updating the documentation, so this will soon maybe be a bit more clear. But this is the flag we need, and we may need a few other ones, like there is one to omit the title bar, which is this one. And if we want to combine two, then we just have to set the one in the appropriate place here. Let's copy that one, paste it here, save the program, go back to the browser. There it is, refresh the screen. And what you see is here now I still have my window, but inside the window everything is now basically aligned as if you would just put these HTML controls directly in an HTML file. So there is no particular positioning applied, and the controls now have their original sizes as they would render in the DOM. Let's set a few other flags here, which you can read about in the documentation. So this is basically what you will want to set for a web page type window. And when I now refresh the screen, you see that also the title bar has gone, and I just have the controls on screen on a blank canvas, And so this is what we're going to work with. What we're going to do is now we want to apply a CSS grid layout in this case. I think it makes a lot of sense because we always have a label and a field, label field. So we want these underneath each other. And we want the say hello button in the third row. And the way to do that is we would have to tell the window, apply a CSS grid layout and give it 2 columns. How would we do this? In a CSS file, you would write display grid or display inline grid. Then you would say grid template columns and then the column width for 2 columns like 1FR, 1FR to have equally 1 fraction for each column. And then maybe we want to set a column gap and a row gap by saying, well, make it a 5 pixel gap. So the window comes with a method called set panel style. And what this does is basically it sets a style property directly in the window div container that represents the window. What you need to know is that a window, and also later you're going to work with child windows, is represented by 3 nested div containers, an outer one, a middle one, and an inner one. The reason for that is basically how BBJ constructs the DOM structure and that it's applying different properties to each of the layers. So we just need them, and you need to remember that there are 3 of them and not just 1. And we need the inner one, which would be the panel. And so we do a set panel style on that. So I say window.set panel style, and then we start with display grid, or in this case, for those of you familiar with CSS, you know that an inline grid would not take the full width of the screen, but just render in a layout that is structured, but it's kept a bit more narrow. So in this case, I decide to use inline grid. Then we can copy that line twice again. And then the next one we want to set is the grid template columns. And we need 2 columns with 1 fraction each. So it's just 1FR, 1FR. And in the course material, I have added a few links that where you can read about CSS and grid layout and so on in case you're not familiar with what I'm doing here. And then the next one I want to set is a gap of 5 pixels in between the columns and rows so that we are not too narrow, close to each other. Now I save the program and let's have a look at what's happening here. I refresh the screen and here's my CSS grid layout. The next thing we can do now is we can, for instance, also apply a style property on the button. We want the button not in the first column, but in the second one. So those of you familiar with CSS know that there is a grid-column property I can set. So I can here now add a style on the button. In this case, since the button is not a panel or a window, there is only one set style, which I can apply directly, which is set style. And then I do grid-column. And we go to column number 2. So now hit refresh. And there we go with the button now in the second column. Now the last thing I want to do for this short video is I want to have the button in a little bigger color and so on. So in the course material I'm a bit more detailed about it, but here I'm just showing you how this is done. For instance, I can say something like button.setStyle color, and I can do something like green, and you see that now the font is turning to a light green. Maybe you can see it. But the real strong thing about the BBJ controls is that they also expose style and theme attributes, which you can set with set attribute. So I can say set attribute, and then I say theme, success, and I do the same with size. So there's also an attribute called expanse, which I can set. As I make the button XL, extra large. And now you see I have a nice green button with a success themed background. The size has gone also to extra large. Have a look at the course material in more detail and follow the steps that are described there so that you can kind of repeat the steps I did step by step in your own IDE and read a bit more about what I did that quickly in this short video.